Let's imagine for a moment that in that scene where Yosef reveals himself to his brothers, he is actually interacting with them like a business owner or a boss interacts with his or her employees. So let's frame it from that perspective, looking at it that it's the authority, it's the one in charge, speaking to the ones who are looking to appease that authority or figure out how to solve whatever problem they're facing and work it out between the two parties. So there's a tension between them. Yosef is boss and his brothers are, so to speak, the employees in this scenario. Now, there's tension because the brothers don't know that their boss is on their side. He doesn't know that he knows them, he loves them. They don't realize that this is Yosef, their brother. And so the pasuk tells us, it says, Vayomer Yosef elachav, that Yosef says to his brothers, Geshuna elai, come closer to me. And they came closer. And as he reveals his identity, that he's his brother, he says, Ani Yosef achichem, I'm your brother, asher mechartem osi, the one that you sold Mitzrayim, to Egypt. Va'ata, but now that I'm telling you this, now that you realize that I'm your brother, and this whole time, this dynamic, this tension between us that was there 13 years ago before you sold me is still here now because I'm the one in charge. I'm still calling the shots. I'm still the favorite in Egypt. And you're looking to me for help right now because you need food and sustenance. V'ata, right now, al te'atzvu va'al yichar beinechem. Don't become angry. Don't actually get upset with yourselves in your own eyes. Don't become angry with yourselves. Why would they become angry with themselves? Ki mechartem osi. Because you sold me. Yeah, you did. I'm going to call a spade a spade. You sold me. But so why should you not be blaming yourselves for that? Why should you not be angry with each other and with yourselves because you sold me? And that puts you in the situation where now I'm in Egypt, I'm in charge, I run the food, I'm in charge of basically the world's economy, and you need help sustaining your family and getting food to bring back to our father. And getting your brother out of jail. And dealing with this mean guy who's the viceroy of Egypt. But now the same problem is playing out. So how does this play out actually in business? How does this help us understand how to manage conflict, resolve conflict, and actually manage employees? So the next line is very powerful. He says, Heina kilimichya. Yosef tells his brothers, because you shouldn't be angry that you sold me, because for food, shilachani elokim lifnechem. Because there was going to be a time, which is right now, where 13 years ago you didn't know it was going to exist. And the problem that you've been trying to handle over the last 13 years of resolving, how do we sold him, what happened to him, our father can't be consoled because he knows he's still alive, and now we need food for our family, and now we're trying to get our brother back out of jail. All these frustrations, all these issues that we're facing, in the seed of the problem that you're facing now, in the seed of the tension, the conflict that we're in together, is the solution. And that's why you shouldn't be angry with yourselves. Because God sent me in advance. Years before you even realized that you would have to come down for food, God sent me in advance to be now positioned in the place in Egypt with my power and authority to be able to serve you and give you lemichya, to give you food. He sent me lifnechem. He sent me before you. Embedded in the problem you're now facing, and embedded in the problem that you faced when you sold me to Egypt, was the solution that in advance God realized you were going to need this problem to be set up in a way where it will be the solution to your problem you did not even yet have. When you're working on an issue that your team is facing, that your employees are facing, and there's friction between them, the first step is to realize, hold on a second, guys. How is this exactly what we want? How is this problem that we have actually have embedded in it the solution to the very problem? So it's about reframing what is it about what we're facing right now that is actually exactly what we want, even if we can't see it that way, which is why we're still calling it a problem. So Yosef is saying, don't beat yourselves up, because the very issue, that the problem that you guys thought you did, it was actually divine. You're supposed to be doing that. You were just playing through to God's plan. When something goes wrong in business, it's just playing through to the way it's supposed to be going. But you have to then ask your team, how is this what we want? Yosef did two things that I think are really, really powerful in business. The first one is he said, how is this already what we want it to be? That was his first approach in showing his employees, his brothers, how to solve conflict, how to solve the issue. The second question he asked them was, okay, if we don't see it that way, well, how is it that from the beginning of this, we can look at how things played out and see that the way that things played out either played out amongst our employees or amongst our clients or around the issue that we're facing right now and feeling that we have to clean up the problem. How is that problem, right? So for example, Yosef being sold by his brothers, actually the solution to the problem that they now have today, which is them trying to get food, them trying to get their brother out of Egypt, them trying to be able to get food back to their families to sustain their own children and their father. And the answer is that the first problem is actually the solution to the current problem. And when you're not able to see that, we beat ourselves up as business owners. Man, I should have said that. I wish we think of the best line to close the sale after the conversation was over. Or we think of the best marketing strategy in hindsight 2020, which we now see 2020 didn't have much hindsight, right? And then it says the next line, the next pasuk is fascinating. God sent me before you, in order to be a minister, in order to be someone who's actually playing on your side in this land of Egypt, in order to feed you and sustain you. Right now, the problem that you're facing has in it the solution. Find it. That's one. Two, the second strategy is, if you continue in the story, it says that Yosef has this conversation with his brothers. They reunite, they cry. It's a beautiful scene. And he sends his brothers, he loads them up with food and sends them back to his father. And they go. And he says, oh, before you go, Vayomer alehem, al tirgizu badarech. Do not start to argue with each other. Do not become upset with each other on the way. Why is he saying that? What does it matter? They just realized that now they have food. They have an ace in the hole. The number 2 guy in the whole world economy is now feeding them and is on their side. He's their brother and he loves them and he forgives them and he cares about them. Why would they possibly argue? If anything, they'd be celebrating galore. You know why he says that? Because as you're departing from the place where you're trying to meet with your team and solve a problem that you're facing, you know what happens? People walk out and they start pointing fingers at each other. Hey, you know the reason why we're even in this situation? It's because Susan should have done this. It's because you should have done that. It's because only if we would have done this in this case, then we would have done better. So people start playing the blame game. And you know what Yosef said? He said, hold on a second, guys. You guys did that 13 years ago. You guys are probably going to be doing it again now. And so step 3 of this 3-step process, when you're solving a problem, when you're working with your team to resolve an issue, Yosef is saying, hold on a second, future focused is the way to go. Because when you start playing the blame game, you look at the past. And Rashi says this is what he thought was going to play out. They're going to be pointing out to each other that it was your fault because you sold him. And they're going to be speaking negatively about each other. And that would cause another fight. Guess what happened last time the brothers fought? They created a new problem. So he's saying when you are solution focused rather than problem focused and saying, how is this something that we can move forward from? How is this something that is actually what we want it to be? And then how is the future? How is the next step? Something that we can say, okay, from what happened, now we can move forward. Feedback is the pathway forward. Instead of failure is the pathway backward. Right? There's a book called Failing Forward. That's what Yosef was trying to teach them to do. Don't argue about the past. Don't point fingers. That is not the way to do it. And why do you have to say it to them? Because the natural response is guilt, is even shaming and blaming. And in the office, when there's conflict, if there's blame and friction, that takes the bad days at the office and makes them the worst days at the office. So when you specifically want to gather your team together, you speak to them as the leader and instruct them to move forward to the next step and acknowledge what happened. And as they depart from the meeting, they need to take the next steps, but tell them, the next steps are this, don't look back. If you're trying to walk upstairs or you're teaching a child how to walk upstairs, you make sure to tell them, look at where you're going, because if you turn around, you're going to fall backwards and it's going to be painful. Not only are you going to fail in your efforts to achieve the next level, but you're actually going to hurt yourself by falling backwards in the process. So Point number 2 is look forward, fail forward. Your past, which is what Yosef was teaching them, your past does not equal your future. And point number 1 was life, situations, problems in business do not happen to you. God does not put you in these situations for them to happen to you. They happen for you. The problems that we have are actually for us. They're for our benefit. And look how well and magnificently we see that it played out for Yosef and his brothers in this week's Parsha. Tune in next week, 10 a.m., Parsha and Parnassa. I'd love to hear your comments and what resonated with you. See you next week.